Hello and welcome. My name is Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today, I'd like to relate something that I saw on Street of Silence. It's about UFOs hovering over military bases. In written testimony in the 2025 congressional hearings, former Air Force security policeman and head of security at Vandenberg Air Force Base, Jeffrey Nucatelli, explained that between 2003 and 2005, the National Reconnaissance Office called the launch occurring on the base at the time as the most important in decades. Nucatelli would go on to say that all three incidents from this period were witnessed by multiple personnel, documented, investigated, and reported up the chain of command. And this launch at Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as other incidents at the base, were witnessed by UFOs. The first event happened on the morning of October the 14th, 2003. That day, Boeing contractors were working near missile defense sites on the north and south side of the base. Around 8:45 a.m., workers on the south side of the base reported seeing a massive glowing red square hovering silently. The craft had no wings, no rotors, and there was no sound of any engine. The south side of the base was the most sensitive part of it, and that's where the missile fields were located. Witnesses described the UFO as hard-edged and with a crimson color, one that was so bright it bathed the perimeter in red light. The craft was massive, so massive in fact, that the media coverage later described it as the size of a football field and eventually named it the Vandenberg Red Square. The UFO did not maneuver aggressively. It just hung there in the sky over one of the United States' key missile defense locations. After several minutes, it drifted behind nearby hills and disappeared. Later, Nucatelli testified that official Air Force records of this event exist and are now held by the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in the FBI. That would be enough for most bases to go on high alert, especially ones with top secret testing and experimental aircraft. That same night, Nucatelli was on duty when security guards at a critical launch site radioed in a state of panic. The guards said, "It's coming right at us, now! It's right here!" Moments later, it took off. It's gone. Nucatelli darted off, heading toward the site, and when he arrived there, 5 witnesses told him what they had seen. It was a massive rectangular craft. Once again, it was red and massive, larger than a football field. It hovered silently for about 45 seconds and then took off at a high speed. The shape of the craft was different, but with the same pattern of appearing over sensitive infrastructure, doing nothing hostile, and leaving before anyone could respond, happened yet again. One interesting detail comes from the light, though. While in the first sighting, the light lit up the area, in this one, it did not. The craft glowed red, but it did not light up the entire environment. Also, it should be pointed out, we don't know where this happened specifically on the base, just that it wasn't on the south side. And at the end of the day, the incidents shook many individuals working at the base at the time. Something massive had appeared that no one could explain. Reports were filed and officers were briefed. A few days later, things would begin to somewhat return to normal. That would not last. About a week or two later, a third incident occurred. A patrol reported a strange light over the Pacific Ocean heading directly toward the base. It was extremely bright and white. Because it was unannounced and violated restricted airspace, they declared an emergency and launched an armed response. However, before the response team could reach the location, the object descended onto the flight line, effectively stopping a fighter from taking off. Witnesses said the UFO either landed or hovered just above the tarmac. Then instantly it vanished into the night. Nucatelli testified that one witness from this event was allegedly threatened and told to keep quiet. He said that kind of intimidation discouraged further reporting from base personnel who saw things they could not explain. To sum up, within a 2-week period, there were 3 events with multiple witnesses. The first event was a glowing red square over missile defense silos in the morning. The second event was the massive silent rectangle over a launch site that night, and finally, a light that descended onto a flight line and just vanished. All of them occurred at one of the most secure and strategically important military installations in the United States during a period of critical national security launches. In his 2025 testimony, Nucatelli also referenced a separate incident from the same 2003 to 2005 cluster involving a silent football field-sized triangular craft that moved across an entry control point at the base. His message to Congress was direct. He urged them to fund independent research into these events and overclassification that keeps them hidden and to protect witnesses from reprisals. Nucatelli's account does not exist in isolation. Since 2020, other military personnel have testified under oath about UFOs, including Ryan Graves, David Grush, and David Fravor. Nucatelli would later stress for the 3 events, all the witnesses did their jobs, they documented it, reported it, and some of them were told to be quiet about it. This raises a few questions, like how many of these UFO incursions over Air Force bases are occurring and are not being reported. It seems many who see these craft have been threatened or discredited in hopes of ensuring their sighting does not get proper press coverage. And while these events might seem highly unusual, UFOs flying over top-secret sites is more common than you might think. We have seen this quite a bit, leading to all sorts of theories on what is happening. The first theory is that these entities are being passive-aggressive and they are flying around military installations as a show of force. They are not being directly aggressive or hostile, but they are trying to let leaders know that if needed, they can penetrate our defenses and easily. It has been reported that sometimes these craft fly around bases and take nuclear weapon systems offline. These events date back decades, all the way to the 60s, and there's no way of knowing just how often this happened. In 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, multiple witnesses claimed that a glowing red object hovered near the base while 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles suddenly went offline. Former Air Force officers later testified that the shutdown was simultaneous and unexplained by technical faults. But just 1 year later, a similar event happened in North Dakota at Mano Air Force Base. There haven't been any recent reports of UFOs taking nuclear missiles offline, but that doesn't mean that it might have occurred and it just wasn't reported. In fact, I think it's very likely that this happened, as UFOs have been interacting more with pilots and been seen quite a bit around bases. There's another theory that these UFOs are just curious, and that's why they've been showing up around these sites. Proponents of this theory point out that UFO sightings happen quite frequently, and so it should be expected that every once in a while they show up over a top-secret base. So are these UFOs just curious, or are they concerned about our nuclear missiles? And could they also just be man-made craft by the Chinese or Russians on reconnaissance missions to see what we're up to? My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.